The underground fighting circuit had one rule: no cops, no military, no questions asked. Carmen Riley violated all three every time she stepped into the ring. If anyone discovered that their undefeated champion was actually a military police officer, it wouldn't just end her career, it would end her life. But the money was too good, and her secret was too important to stop. Staff Sergeant Carmen Riley was everything the United States Army expected from a military police officer. Her uniform was always immaculate, her bearing was professional, and her dedication to enforcing military law was absolute. At 26, she had already earned commendations for exceptional service and was considered one of the most promising young leaders in the military police corps. Her colleagues respected her judgment, her superiors trusted her competence, and her subordinates admired her fairness. What nobody at Fort Campbell knew was that Carmen Riley was living one of the most dangerous double lives in military history. Every weekend, she transformed from a disciplined law enforcement officer into a ruthless underground fighter who had never lost a match and had sent 17 opponents to the hospital with injuries that ended their fighting careers permanently. Which city in the world are you watching this video from today? Please subscribe and support us for more stories. Carmen's entry into underground fighting began 2 years earlier, not from any desire for violence or excitement, but from a financial desperation that military pay could never address. Her younger brother Marcus had been diagnosed with a rare genetic condition that required experimental treatment, costing over $400,000. Military insurance covered standard medical care, but experimental procedures were considered elective and were not covered under any military medical program. Marcus was 19 years old and had been Carmen's responsibility since their parents died in a car accident when she was 22. She had raised him while maintaining her military career, using her military benefits to support his education and medical needs. When his diagnosis came with a terminal prognosis and a treatment option that offered hope but came with an impossible price tag, Carmen faced a choice between accepting his death or finding ways to generate money that her military salary could never provide. Carmen's combat training in the military police had been comprehensive and intensive, including advanced hand-to-hand combat techniques, weapons proficiency, and tactical response procedures. However, her fighting abilities went far beyond standard military training. She had studied martial arts since childhood and had continued developing her skills throughout her military career, viewing combat proficiency as essential for effective law enforcement. The underground fighting scene that Carmen discovered operated in a legal gray area where wealthy spectators paid enormous sums to watch skilled fighters compete in matches that were more violent and less regulated than any sanctioned combat sport. The fighters who participated were typically experienced martial artists, former professional athletes, or individuals with military or law enforcement backgrounds who needed money and possessed the skills necessary to survive in unregulated combat. Carmen's first underground fight was arranged through a contact she met at a civilian martial arts gym, where she trained during off-duty hours. The contact, who used the name Rodriguez, claimed to represent investors who organized exclusive fighting events for clients who wanted to see combat that was more authentic than professional sports provided. The financial terms he offered were extraordinary: $10,000 for participating, regardless of outcome, and $25,000. The venue for Carmen's first underground fight was a converted warehouse in an industrial area outside Nashville, about an hour's drive from Fort Campbell. The space had been modified with professional lighting, camera equipment, and a regulation-size fighting cage, but the atmosphere was unlike any legitimate sporting event. The spectators were obviously wealthy. The security was provided by individuals who appeared to be private military contractors, and the entire operation had the feel of something that existed outside normal legal boundaries. Carmen's opponent for her first fight was a former mixed martial arts professional who had been banned from sanctioned competition due to excessive violence and suspected use of performance-enhancing drugs. He was 6 inches taller and 40 pounds heavier than Carmen, with a professional record that included numerous knockout victories. The betting odds heavily favored her opponent, and several spectators expressed skepticism about a woman competing against such an experienced male fighter. The fight itself lasted less than 3 minutes. Carmen's military training had taught her to end confrontations quickly and decisively, using whatever force was necessary to neutralize threats. Her opponent was accustomed to regulated competition where certain techniques were prohibited and referees intervened to prevent serious injury. Carmen fought as if she were defending her life, using techniques designed to cause maximum damage rather than score points or demonstrate athletic skill. Carmen's victory in her first underground fight established her reputation as a dangerous and unpredictable competitor. Word spread quickly through the underground fighting network about the unknown female fighter who had defeated an experienced professional with brutal efficiency. Promoters began offering her larger purses for future fights, and spectators specifically requested matches featuring the mysterious woman who fought like her life depended on it. The psychological challenge of maintaining her double life was enormous and required constant vigilance. Carmen had to compartmentalize her activities completely, ensuring that her military duties never overlapped with her fighting career and that neither identity compromised the other. She developed elaborate systems for managing her time, finances, and physical condition while avoiding detection by military investigators or criminal organizations. Carmen's success in underground fighting was due partly to her combat skills and partly to the advantage her military training provided in psychological warfare. She understood how to assess opponents, identify weaknesses, and exploit tactical advantages that civilian fighters didn't recognize. Her experience in law enforcement had taught her to remain calm under pressure and make quick decisions in chaotic situations. The financial rewards of Carmen's fighting career were substantial and grew rapidly as her reputation spread. After her first few victories, she was earning $50,000 per fight, with bonuses for particularly impressive performances. Within 6 months, she had accumulated enough money to begin Marcus's treatment, though the full cost of his therapy would require her to continue fighting for at least another year. Carmen's medical care for Marcus required careful coordination to avoid creating paper trails that might reveal the source of her additional income. She used cash payments, false names, and medical facilities that operated with minimal documentation requirements. The experimental treatment was provided by specialists who asked few questions about how patients obtained funding for expensive procedures not covered by insurance. The security measures that Carmen implemented to protect her double life were sophisticated and constantly evolving. She used different vehicles for travel to fighting events, maintained separate bank accounts under false names, and created elaborate alibis for her weekend absences. She told her military colleagues that she was caring for her sick brother, which was partially true but provided cover for activities they could never discover. Carmen's training regimen required her to maintain peak physical condition while hiding the evidence of her fighting activities. She had to conceal injuries sustained during fights, manage recovery time without affecting her military duties, and continue developing her combat skills without attracting attention from colleagues who might question why a military police officer needed such advanced fighting capabilities. The underground fighting circuit that Carmen participated in operated with its own code of conduct and security protocols designed to protect both fighters and spectators from legal consequences. Participants used false names, venues changed frequently, and financial transactions were conducted through intermediaries who ensured anonymity. The entire system was structured to minimize the risk of law enforcement investigation or prosecution. Carmen's reputation in the underground fighting scene eventually earned her the nickname Reaper due to her tendency to end fights with injuries that required extended medical treatment. Spectators began attending events specifically to watch her compete, and her matches commanded premium betting action from wealthy clients who enjoyed wagering large sums on violent combat. The moral conflict that Carmen experienced as her fighting career continued was significant but manageable as long as she could see progress in Marcus's medical treatment. She justified her participation in illegal activities by focusing on the lives she was saving through her brother's recovery and her own survival in a system that didn't provide adequate support for military families facing medical crises. Carmen's closest call with discovery came during her 15th underground fight, when she recognized a spectator as a federal agent who had previously worked with military police on a joint investigation. She realized that law enforcement agencies were aware of the underground fighting circuit and might be conducting surveillance or undercover operations to identify participants. The risk of exposure forced her to implement additional security measures and consider ending her fighting career earlier than planned. The psychological conditioning required for Carmen to transition between her military police duties and her fighting activities was extraordinary and took a significant toll on her mental health. She had to suppress empathy and compassion during fights while maintaining appropriate emotional responses during her law enforcement duties. The constant switching between these different aspects of her personality created stress that affected her sleep, appetite, and personal relationships. Carmen's fighting techniques evolved as she gained experience in underground combat, incorporating elements from her military training with tactics learned from studying her opponents and adapting to the unique requirements of unregulated fighting. She developed a fighting style that was efficient and brutal, designed to end matches quickly while minimizing her own risk of injury. The medical attention that Carmen required after fights had to be obtained without creating records that could be traced back to her military service. She developed relationships with medical professionals who provided treatment for cash payments and didn't ask questions about the nature of injuries. Some of these medical contacts were themselves involved in underground fighting as physicians who treated participants off the books. Carmen's success in underground fighting attracted attention from criminal organizations that controlled aspects of the illegal combat scene. She was approached by representatives of groups that wanted to recruit her for other illegal activities or ensure her cooperation in fights that might be fixed for betting purposes. She had to navigate these relationships carefully to avoid compromising her military career while maintaining her ability to earn the money necessary for Marcus's treatment. The investigation that eventually led to Carmen's exposure began when military police were tasked with investigating reports of military personnel participating in illegal activities off base. The investigation was routine and not specifically targeting underground fighting, but it included surveillance and financial auditing that could potentially reveal Carmen's secret activities. Carmen's preparation for the possibility of discovery included developing exit strategies that would allow her to end her fighting career quickly if necessary, though she hoped to continue until Marcus's treatment was complete. She had contingency plans for destroying evidence, providing explanations for her financial resources, and potentially accepting military discipline if her activities were discovered. The turning point came during Carmen's 23rd underground fight, when she was matched against an opponent who turned out to be a former military contractor with connections to intelligence services. During the fight, her opponent recognized her fighting techniques as similar to those taught in classified military training programs. His post-fight comments to other participants raised questions about Carmen's background that began circulating through the underground fighting network. The exposure of Carmen's identity occurred not through military investigation, but through the criminal networks that controlled underground fighting. Her opponent's suspicions led to an investigation by criminal organizations that discovered her real name and military position. This information was valuable to criminals who could use it for blackmail or to compromise military law enforcement operations. Carmen's realization that her identity had been compromised forced her to make immediate decisions about protecting herself, her brother, and her military career. She knew that criminal organizations might attempt to use information about her illegal activities to pressure her into providing classified information or interfering with military police investigations. The confrontation that ended Carmen's underground fighting career occurred when representatives of a criminal organization approached her with demands that she provide information about upcoming military police operations in exchange for keeping her fighting activities secret. She realized that continuing her double life would eventually require her to betray her military duties and potentially endanger other service members. Carmen's decision to confess her illegal activities to her commanding officer was motivated by her recognition that the risks of continued secrecy outweighed the benefits of the additional income she was earning. Marcus's treatment was progressing successfully, and she had accumulated enough money to cover the remaining costs, making it possible for her to end her fighting career and focus on managing the consequences of her actions. The military investigation that followed Carmen's confession revealed the extent of her underground fighting activities and the sophisticated measures she had taken to conceal her double life. Military investigators were impressed by her operational security, but concerned about the implications of military police personnel participating in illegal activities that could compromise law enforcement operations. Carmen's court-martial proceedings were complicated by the unique nature of her case and the circumstances that had motivated her illegal activities. Military prosecutors had to balance the seriousness of her violations against the extraordinary personal situation that had driven her to risk her career and freedom for her brother's medical needs. The sentence that Carmen received reflected both the severity of her violations and the mitigating circumstances that had motivated her actions. She was reduced in rank, forfeited significant pay, and received a reprimand that would affect her military career prospects, but she was allowed to remain in military service and continue supporting her brother's medical treatment. Carmen's experience became a case study within military justice system and medical support programs, highlighting gaps in military family support systems and the pressures that could drive exemplary service members to risk everything for family obligations that exceeded their financial resources. The underground fighting circuit that Carmen had participated in was subsequently targeted by federal law enforcement agencies that used information from her case to identify and prosecute criminal organizations involved in organizing illegal combat events. Her cooperation with these investigations helped dismantle networks that had been operating for years without detection. Marcus's successful treatment and recovery provided validation for Carmen's belief that her sacrifices had been worthwhile, even though the personal and professional costs had been enormous. His survival and return to normal life confirmed that the risks she had taken were justified by the results they achieved. Carmen's continued military service after her court-martial was marked by exceptional performance and dedication that demonstrated her commitment to rebuilding her reputation and career. She used her experience to mentor other service members facing financial difficulties and became an advocate for expanded military family support programs. The recognition that Carmen eventually received for her military service, though it came after years of rebuilding trust and demonstrating reliability, acknowledged that her violations had been motivated by family loyalty rather than personal gain or criminal intent. Her case influenced policy discussions about military family support and emergency financial assistance programs. Carmen Riley's story illustrates the impossible choices that military personnel sometimes face when system limitations conflict with family obligations. Her willingness to risk everything for her brother's survival demonstrated the depth of family loyalty that could motivate even the most disciplined service members to compromise their careers and values. The woman who had lived one of the most dangerous double lives in military history had ultimately chosen honesty and integrity over continued deception, even when confession guaranteed professional consequences and personal hardship. Her story became a reminder that heroism sometimes requires admitting mistakes and accepting responsibility rather than continuing successful deceptions. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep, and some double lives are too costly to maintain indefinitely. Carmen learned that the most important battles are often fought not against external enemies, but against internal conflicts between duty, family, and survival, and that true courage sometimes means giving up everything you've worked to protect in order to preserve what matters most.